We need to make house calls. We need to listen to people. We need to get back to basics, and we need to move forward.
New DNC Chair Tom Perez laying out the Democratic Party's plans to rebuild after November's election defeat. And we're back with the panel. I got to tell you, we spent the entire commercial arguing about Donald Trump's agenda. I wish we had that. It was actually very, very interesting. One, what do you think that Perez's victory says about the Democratic Party and their path forward in terms of dealing with Donald Trump?
Well, I think the election between Keith Ellison, the congressman from Minnesota, and Tom Perez, the former labor secretary, was portrayed as kind of the Bernie Sanders left backing Ellison, progressive elements, far left wing of the party, versus the Obama wing. I remember, you think about Perez as the former labor secretary, but you had people, Joe Biden, President Obama, and the like, lobbying to get Perez in this position. I think the key issue here that both sides agree on is you've got to go away from centralized Democratic Party politics and get back to building state organizations. And they agree on that. But the key element for that is, can you raise the money, Chris? We saw in the recently released money totals, donation totals for the Republican Party, they doubled what they raised 4 years ago after the election in the month of December. Democrats have not released their totals yet. ACLU, Planned Parenthood, they have record numbers as we see resistance building to Trump, but not the Democratic Party. So that's the key test. And right now, Perez has made Ellison, his vice chair, largely symbolic as a show of unity, because they've got to go to the donors, they've got to go to the base, and somehow channel the opposition to Trump into something that becomes essential, which is winning elections.
Hillary Clinton sent a video message to the DNC meeting, and here's a clip.
Let resistance plus persistence equal progress for our party and our country. So keep fighting and keep the faith. And I'll be right there with you every step of the way.
Steve, do you get the sense that the Democrats have a clue as to why they lost and any notion of an idea of how to build the party back up?
I think the answer to that is partly yes, actually. And I think we've got to separate organizing from message. I think in terms of organizing, to be fair to them, I think the autopsy that is often brought up when they say, well, the Republicans, after they lost in 2012, they did an autopsy. Why won't the Democrats do an autopsy? I think when it comes to organizing, it's kind of happened. I think Juan's right. I think they've all accepted, there's been a real consensus that they need to get back to grassroots, to local and state races, select candidates differently, and harness that energy that's clearly there in terms of the resistance to the new administration and bring that into the party. They've all accepted that. I don't think there's any argument about that. And I think that is something that the Republicans need to take seriously.
But in addition to that, you also need an agenda. You need a message.
That's what I was going to say. The second part, the message, I think there, the news is not so good for the Democrats. I don't think that they've really understood the fact that what's really happened in the last year or so is that working people in America have lost the sense that the Democratic Party is there for them, that is their voice. And Trump and Bannon have plowed into that territory saying, we are there for the American worker. And I think that the election of Perez is actually bad news on that front, because it seems to me that he is more likely to pursue the more coastal agenda, if you like, in terms of focusing on identity politics and so on, rather than, I think, the economic message, which really ought to be the heart of their strategy in the future.
Congress was on recess this week, and we saw at these town halls, particularly that Republican members of Congress held, some emotional protests about the Trump agenda. Here was Tom Cotton of Arkansas in a town hall.
Everyone in this room has been hurt or helped.
I have been helped. I have only been helped. Obamacare saved my life, Senator.
Nobody here has not been affected by Obamacare.
Yes, so because it saved my life, Senator.
Lisa, some folks are comparing this to the Tea Party protests back in 2009, 2010 against Democrats when against Republicans when President Obama was trying to pass Obamacare. And the question I have is, do you see the same kind of grassroots activism here? I mean, do you think this is at all equivalent to what the Tea Party was doing back then?
I mean, I think there's certainly, a lot of anger, and the base is activated. And so that's something that Republicans should watch, absolutely. I mean, I think the Tea Party stood for something. There were principles. I'm not sure. This seems to be more of a movement that's standing against Trump instead of standing for something. specifically. But to Steve's point, and also sort of this broader, this proxy war and sort of fight for the heart and the soul of the Democratic Party, the big challenge they face is in order to enact policy changes, in order to actually move agenda forward, you have to have the numbers. And the big challenge that they face right now is the fact that there are so many Democratic seats that are up for re-election in 2018, particularly in the Senate. They have 23 seats, 10 of those President Trump won, 5 of those President Trump won by double digits. And I think right now with the resistance that we're seeing from the left and this activation of the Democratic base, the problem for them are Democrats going to start seeing primary challenges to the degree that Republicans have for so long? And then what challenges do those present, particularly for those 10 Democrats who are not only looking to their right for someone potentially more moderate or Republican to win those red states, but also to their left and having to engage and win a primary. So I think that's the challenge for the Democratic Party of wading through this battle that they're facing right now.
Julie, what do the officials you talk to in the Trump White House, what do they think of these emotional and well-attended protests? And do they worry at all that this could be a repeat of 2010 when grassroots fervor drove Republicans in this time that in 2018, and yes, there are some numbers that help them, but that it could end up helping Democrats this time?
It's interesting because when you talk to Republicans in the White House versus Republicans on the Hill, I think you actually hear two slightly different stories about these protests. What I hear from officials in the White House is quite similar to what the president says publicly about these. They believe that these are, to some extent, paid activists, people who are coming in from outside of these districts to get on television, to try to make a scene and disrupt these town halls. But on the Hill, Republicans are more concerned, and they believe that they should not underestimate what they're seeing there. And they give a lot of credit to people like Tom Cotton, some of these other lawmakers who are going out there, spending a lot of time answering questions from supporters and from opponents. They think that that is the model, that one of the mistakes that Democrats made during the healthcare town halls in 2010 was shying away from it, was not really getting in the weeds and trying to defend the policy. And they think that the way that Republicans can get ahead of this is to actually engage with these people as opposed to doing what some of the folks in the White House are doing, which is to just dismiss this as a paid protest.
The part of this is it's not just the town halls. If you look now at the president's approval numbers, they're in the low to mid 40s, and at a very low point for a new president, first month in. So you have the town halls, and you get people like Senator Mitch McConnell, the majority leader, Republican majority in the Senate, saying, it was a change election for the White House, but it wasn't for the Senate, and making some distance now between his fate and fortune and the Trump White House. And I think that's troubling for the Trump White House.
But it's also important to point out that the Associated Press just ran a story about the fact that those 10 vulnerable Democrats senators are also not holding town halls as well. And I think the big problem for Republicans right now, particularly with Obamacare, is there's a vacuum of information in the sense that Republicans haven't presented a clear plan. So it's very difficult to combat some of the narratives because, there's nothing to really point to.
And let me just quickly say that's going to be the key, because if they do repeal and replace, the success of repeal and replace is going to be really important in 2018. Thank you, panel. See you next Sunday.